What's happening? It's Eddie here with Guitar Mastery Method, and today I'm going to be giving you some rapid fire, quick and easy tips to help improve your guitar playing. But be sure to stick around till the very end of the lesson because I've got a free gift for you and your guitar that you're going to love. Now the purpose of this lesson is just to help you get more mileage of what you likely already know. And if you don't already know it, it'll be a pretty simple thing to pick up. Matter of fact, some of the things that we're going to be covering involve what you don't play as opposed to what you do play. Which brings me to tip number one, which is leaving space. This is especially important in the blues. In fact, it's a huge part of it. You know, it's not about what you play, it's what you don't play. This is especially true because what you don't play, it's not really just about leaving space for the sake of it, but it's in how you do it. Sometimes the right rest or the right pause can just make you go, ooh. So let's take, for example, like what I was doing in the beginning of the video, playing over a Chicago blues style backing track in the key of E, right? So if we're here in the E minor pentatonic scale that we all know and love, right? That's territory for all manner of tasty blues licks, right? So we're not even gonna need to expand beyond that for the purposes of this lesson, but let's talk about leaving space, right? Personally, my favorite region of the minor pentatonic scale is this middle region here. These four middle notes, I love those. There's just something about that box I just always gravitate to, you know? Of course, I get plenty of use out of the other, boxes of the scale, but this one right here, I love to experiment with that one because that's like, it's such a simple, limited, little framework to work with so you can force yourself to come up with interesting ideas, and leaving space is one of those things that can really make your phrasing sound more interesting. So if I were to do, let's say, a very popular kind of default minor pentatonic blues lick, something like that. Okay, cool, that's fine. It's been done to death, but hopefully I won't get any boos for playing that, right? Unless you just hate the blues in general, which if you do, why are you here? Anyway, just kidding, glad to have you here. When we're doing a lick like this, we can just put some little pockets of space, right? So let's take this first part of it. I love that first part, because right after that, when you do that bend and then kind of choke it, right? You mute the string, and then that right there is where the space begins. And then nothing, and then just come in with something like that. To me, you almost broke it up into two licks, As opposed to, you just kind of took it, didn't add too much to it, right? But you definitely threw some space in there. And by doing that, in my opinion, made the lick so much more interesting. Now let's take, for example, another popular blues lick that's been, run into the ground. Right? Again, great lick, it's fine. But let's make it more interesting, right? Let's throw in some space. So you can go like, ooh. Like I've heard Billy Gibbons do that a lot. And just stops. Love that. And then with that space there, you can go throw in that root note, or just throw it in there if you want to. And just by doing that, you're making, the listener wait in anticipation, either subconsciously or consciously, and then you pay it off by giving them that note that they're expecting to hear, Which leads me to the next tip, which is to focus on timing. So when you have space now into the equation, you can now adhere to some timing. Remember when I was throwing in space and it was making me kind of move a little bit? I was adding timing to it. So adding timing and rhythm to your phrases will make them almost seem vocal in a way, but of course is a total hallmark of musical maturity. So let's say we want to add some, if we want to add some timing, you may ask, okay, how do I even do that? Before you even play anything on your guitar, if you have a backing track going or something, or even if you're just sitting by yourself, or if you got your metronome going even, this is something I do with the metronome all the time. I'll just have it going just to give me some kind of rhythmic center to focus on. Then I'll just, in my head, just pretend I'm like a jazz vocalist and I'll scat something simple, right? Like da-da-do, 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 da, something like that, right? Sounds silly when I do it out loud, but believe me, this is a great exercise. So when I have that line, da-da-do, 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 da, okay, let's now adapt that to some notes in the pentatonic scale. So like that little box I was telling you about, right? So da-da-da, 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 right? Right there, I got myself a nice phrase just by starting with the idea, like in its larval stage out here, and then actualizing it through the fretboard with just a really, really simple set of notes to work with, right? Now I got this nice percussive, cool sounding lick, you know? I've always taken the James Brown approach when it comes to coming up with musical ideas, is starting with the drums, right? Starting with the beat. It's like starting from the ground up. That always seems to inspire ideas. And speaking of simple, the next thing you can do to improve your lead guitar playing that's really simple is just repeat licks, right? Especially if we're doing something like a blues example. There's, just like with leaving space, repeating licks is just as important, you know? So if I'm doing a lick like something like that, I can just repeat that all day long and it works, you know? So take a lick, a simple lick, and then just repeat it. Like you've heard this one before. Right? Classic example of a repeating lick. And it doesn't have to be that flashy or that complex. It can be something like, I like to use triplets, right? Triplet, 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 triplet. Those are great for repeating, you know, and you could take any collection of notes and do, right? Triplet, 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 right? So just take a, you know, whatever notes you want, make a triplet pattern out of it, and then just repeat it a bunch of times. And that's a simple way to add some interesting, new, and improved lead guitar ideas. So it doesn't require anything groundbreaking, right? Just find a lick that's very repeatable. Generally something that's a triplet is very easy to do that with. And then just do it, and then see how much you like it. And now we're gonna get into the slightly more heady stuff with this next tip on how you can improve your lead guitar playing, which is by the use of chord tones. Which is a simple idea by itself, but we're gonna make it even simpler and just focus on one particular chord tone for the purposes of this lesson. So we may know the root note all day long, right? So if we're in the key of E and you're playing an E note, voila, that's the root. No matter what, when you play an E over an E, always gonna work. But it's not always gonna be fun and exciting. So one thing you can do is find another note that implies the overall chord. So if we're playing an E blues, right? Generally we're dealing with E major. So there's a particular chord tone, this one right here to be exact, which is the major third. It's a very effective chord tone. In fact, it's one of the most telling chord tones on what actual chord is being played. That third is very important, you know? Just from these two notes, let's say the root and the third, the major third, that already feels like, or it tells me, it gives me enough information to say that we are pretty much in E major territory, right? It's not as neutral as, let's say, a fifth, right? Right, but the third really takes us there melodically, right? So, and especially in blues, you know? Classic move, you know, is to focus on that chord tone. So in this case, right, if we're in this box here of the E minor pentatonic, the third is right here on the 13th fret of the G string. So if we were to think almost like making this kind of a chromatic thing, right? 12, 13, 14 on the G string within the realm of the, you know, the overall minor pentatonic. Notice how it really takes it to a very definitive place musically when we employ that chord tone, right? So, right? As opposed to if we were to just stick with the minor third, which is what the minor pentatonic is made of. It's like, yeah, it sounds very minor pentatonic, but when I do this, now it's like, ooh, okay. So I stayed on the minor tonality for a little bit so you can get used to it, get settled on it, and then I'm like, and it's like, woo, okay, there we got some major thrown in there. And of course in the blues, weaving back and forth between major and minor pentatonic is a very common move, and it breaks the rules slightly, but in a way that just is super cool, right? And it works. So, but we're not done there. We got the chord tone over the one chord, right? Over the E, so we have that note there. But what about the four chord, right? So if we're in the key of E, our four chord is going to be A. Let me just play it down here. So it's going to be A. So if we want to find the major third of A, we want to find it in a place that's easy to find, right? So again, just focusing on the minor pentatonic shape here that we know for E minor. Let's find that third over the 4 chord, which happens to be right here, the 14th fret of the B string. So we have the 3rd of E and then the 3rd of A. Right there. Now granted, this is something that will only truly pop out in its intended form when the 4 chord of the progression is actually playing. So if you're hearing that A minor, or the A7 chord, right? The 4 chord, you're hearing it in there, that note can really work. And so I like to do moves like this, where it's like bending up to it from a half step below. And then when you come here to the 14th fret of the G string, right, that actually is like the root note of A, because that's an A note right there. So it works there, right? And then of course with the 5 chord, which is B, right? We're actually going to be going slightly outside of the pentatonic pattern here and playing the 11th fret of the high E string, which is the same as here, right? If we were to play the, what is that, the 16th fret on the B string. I kind of like it here though, because it goes like, it sounds weird and jarring, but cool, right? But especially if that 5 chord in the progression is being played. Ooh, that's cool. It really signals that chord change. And then when we have the 4 chord coming in, we go. Then we resolve it to the 1. And these chord tones imply the chord so strongly that you don't even need a backing track to make it obvious, right? Of course it's fun and it helps, but if you're just on your own, right, I can imply those chords right now with no backing, just from you listening. Check this out. So that was just to show you how you can hear the chords, the movement of the chord progression, just by me like kind of painstakingly focusing on those chord tones. So in the case of playing in a blues, right, if you're playing over the 1 chord, you got that note you can throw in the mix, and then when you hear the 4 chord happening, you got that note, and then when the 5 chord happens, you got that one. And then around those chord tones, just play minor pentatonic, you know? You know, so that absolutely works. And last but not least, the final tip to improve your lead guitar playing is to add just a little bit of chromaticism, but not even in a way that's complicated. In fact, this is a fun way to make your note choices more interesting, even if it's just something as simple as the root note. Is, let's say, take the root note, like E here, for example, and then do something like this. Right, you're just focusing on the chromatic notes, just right a fret below and a fret above the root note. And then you can do something like this. You know, so it's like I'm kind of dancing through these chord tones, right, or notes in the scale. And then it just gives it a more interesting sound. Or you can use, you know, like the upper chromatic note. And when you do that, it almost gives it this feeling of like you're playing outside, because you're just kind of playing like quote unquote wrong notes, but in a way that's rhythmic and that's intentional and interesting. And then when you do that, the important thing is that you resolve it. You got to bring it on home. And when I mean you can use any note, right, to apply this chromaticism, I mean any note, right? Any note in the scale, even the chord tones. You know, it just adds this really kind of fun, colorful sort of sound. But when you're employing them, right, just got to make sure that you resolve. If you create too much tension with it, you want to be able to resolve it. So if you're going like, you know, there's that way you can do it. You can also do something like, which is kind of like a thing you hear in like classical music a lot too. It's kind of orchestral to do a move like that, right? Where you have the center note. It's like you're enclosing the target note, right, with just the fret below and the fret above. So enclosures is a very common thing that a lot of pro guitar players do. And it's also a cool exercise and a way to get like kind of a quick burst of speed if you want. You know. So it's pretty cool, you know, and it doesn't have to be fast like that. Like I said, there's a multitude of different ways you can approach it, but all you're really having to worry about or focus on, so you don't have to think too hard, is any target note that you're intending on playing, you know, use the fret below it and the fret above it to create those interesting colors like that. So you've just been given a round of simple but effective tips to improve your lead guitar playing right damn now. And I'm sure that by now, you're dying to know what more you can do to improve your guitar playing even further. And it just so happens to be that free gift I was telling you about. Remember that? Well, here it is. This is the Fretboard Conveyor Belt. It's a system that I've developed that I'm grateful to say has already helped thousands of guitar players all around the world learn how to navigate the fretboard and play with comfort and confidence, the way you should, you know what I mean? So be sure to click here to claim your copy or check the link in the description box. Playing guitar is meant to be a rewarding and joyful experience. And while it might take some work, it's not something that ever needs to be overcomplicated.